All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Fearcast. This is the podcast dedicated to OCD and anxiety spectrum disorders and getting your life back. I'm your host, Kevin Foss, and I'm a licensed therapist specializing in OCD and anxiety disorders. And thank you all so much for joining me for today's episode. This is going to be perhaps a short episode. We're going to kind of keep it short to the point. And we're going to go into the question archives. We got questions from people have sent in. So this is a question and answer based podcast for those of you who are new to this. That people go over to fearcastpodcast.com, send me a question by clicking on the submit a question link and type in their question there. Of course, you can also send in your audio question that goes to the top of the list, which will be recorded as soon as I possibly can. You can record that by going to fearcastpodcast.com and recording your voice there. You can send me a question over at Instagram. I'm Fearcast Podcast over there. Send me a DM. Click on the microphone button, record your voice. You can also just record your voice over on your phone, on the voice memo app or whatever program you like to use, and just email it to me at questions@fearcastpodcast.com. Either way, there are tons of ways to get in, five ways to get in questions to Fearcast Podcast, and that's what the whole point of this podcast is. I've been doing this for 8 years now, and it's crazy that it's been going this long, and I'm just so appreciative to all the listeners, anybody who's sent in their question, and just letting me be a part of your recovery process. So this is an exciting. It's an exciting thing to kind of get to this time of year, because this is the anniversary kind of around this time when I started it. So either way, I'm not going to get too sentimental. I hope everybody is gearing up for the OCD conference that's going to be happening next weekend. So this is being recorded the Thursday before, or the Thursday before the Thursday that I'll be going. So a week before. Anyways, whole point is coming out on Monday before the conference. But if you're going, I hope to see everybody there. I'm excited to see what sort of talks are going to be there and what's going to be happening. I've never been to Seattle, so we're going to see what's happening. I'm looking into going to the top of the Seattle, the needle, that thing. I hate heights. I don't like them. They're not fun. They're bad. I'm going to say they're bad. So I'm looking to go to the top of it because I think they're bad. So of course I should do it, because I know it will be hard and uncomfortable, but I'm going to try to do it. If I do it, I'll report back and let you know how it goes, if it fits into the schedule, but looking into it. All right, so I'm just going to get into it. I've got two questions today I'm going to be reading over, one from Alex, one from Salt and Pepper. That's the name they gave me, so that's the name I'm going to be reading. I'm going to try to make them relatively short. They're relatively short questions. We're just going to try to get directly into them, but here we go. I guess not but, and here we go. So the first question coming from Alex, they say, "Hello, Kevin. Since I was 17 years old, I've been struggling with various types of OCD. The most recent one is POCD, so pedophile OCD, for those of y'all who are unaware." They go on to say, "One day I was scrolling through my Facebook homepage, and I saw a video of children. For some reason, I decided to check if what I was seeing caused me arousal, and it kind of did. So I thought." They go on to say, "After that, I got used to doing this with every girl I saw, checking to see if I got aroused. Of course, the groinals got worse, and now I'm at a place where I don't know what's true or not anymore. I honestly don't think that I could become a pedophile overnight, but the mere existence of this thought is killing me. Also, lately the thoughts have been feeling like urges, or more definitive, 'you will do that' thoughts. Is this a normal process for POCD?" So, Alex, thank you for sending this in. I'm going to guarantee there are people somewhere in the world who are listening to this who appreciate that you sent this in, because it's validating that they have had this experience, because you have had this experience. So, the OCD can manifest for a lot of people in a lot of different ways. It can start a lot of different ways, but hearing people's stories about how it started to show up and the way it started to impact them, it can absolutely have this effect of kind of normalizing it, and it can feel encouraging that there are other people out there, so that you're not just feeling like you're the one person on earth who's been feeling this. So what I love about your question is it really highlights how innocently compulsions can start and how simply and how quick they can start. So, you were talking about how you were going through Facebook and, you saw, a video of a child. So this thought came up, I wonder if I'm aroused. And you started to notice like, you said for some reason I decided to check if I was aroused, and you said I kind of was. So there are a lot of things to say to that. I'll say a couple of things to that. One, I think some of this, if you have questions, I'm going to say this to the next questioner as well. If there are these questions and struggles that you're kind of noticing, I think a lot of these can be unpacked with a therapist. I hope you are working with a therapist. But some of these questions and some of these concerns can be helpful to process through, to look at what this felt like, what was going through your mind, and what was happening at the time, to start working out how to identify the trigger, how to identify what that feared story is, and what that compulsive cycle is. All right. But what sometimes happens for a lot of folks is that you're just doing something innocently, going through Facebook, and all of a sudden you see something, and this random thought pops into your mind. So you check, you look into it, you evaluate, you wonder, you Google, you ask. Whatever it might be, you think about, you process through, you recall a memory, you evaluate a feeling, you think about the future. All these different things that happen so quickly, and you probably wouldn't have even thought about it. And then it happened. And then you might have felt some relief, you might have felt some certainty, you might have developed some confidence, or in this case, it might have triggered even more anxiety, which then started in a whole other process. But what sometimes happens is this activity happens innocuously, and you get this new feeling with it. And now that can start a whole process. That can start the routine of now having to check. So on the one hand, I heard in this, well, I did this thing innocuously, and now I started to do it because that first time I did it, it felt kind of relieving, or it felt confirming, or whatever it might be. And there might have been this slight dopamine rush, or this slight now connection between this experience of seeing a video of a child, which you had no control over, and then now this process. So that's certainly one way it can happen. The other way it can happen is, well, you did this one action, which was innocuous and neutral, or whatever it might be, and then that triggered a whole new story. Well, I did this action. Well, now what does this say? Well, now I need to look into that. So the whole point I'm bringing up is it's important to start noticing when you are doing something, not because you want to do it, but because it feels like you have to do it. It feels obligatory, right? It feels perhaps compulsive, to use a term. The idea behind that is you are in control of your actions and what you do in response to the thoughts that you have. So it's important to then catch yourself when you're doing something, not because you want to, but it feels like you're obligated, required to do so, or else something bad, or if you don't check it, it's going to mean something, or you're going to develop into something, or you're not going to be able to ward off of something. Or maybe even more simply said, if you don't care to do it, don't do it. The other thing you said was sometimes these obsessions or these thoughts are starting to feel these obsessions are starting to feel like urges, and sometimes they have a more directive statement as opposed to this kind of like questioning what if, right? We talked on this podcast a lot. A lot of times an obsession can manifest itself as this what if question or if then sort of relationship, right? If I touch this, then this thing might happen. If I don't do this action, this might be a result, right? Sometimes, though, it can present itself as this command statement. This is going to happen. This is a fact of something that's going to happen. And that can be anxiety-provoking. Now, underneath that might be this thought of, well, I had this thought, well, what if it's true? I had this thought, what if I'm going to take this action, right? So, again, the reason I bring up the therapist thing is that these are some of those things to start unpacking and pulling out and start recognizing these patterns, right? But with that, I think at the end of the day, we're going to treat these the same. We're going to treat that command statement. What was the phrasing you said? That you will do this, right? and I've heard this a lot when it comes to like harm obsessions, certainly those taboo obsessions, right? You are this, you are a pedophile, you will hurt somebody, you are a violent person. Fill in the blank. You are gay, or you are a lesbian, or you are straight for that matter, right? It can be a lot of these command statements, and it feels uncomfortable. It feels as if, for some people, I've heard some people describe it as like it feels like their conscience is telling them something, or it feels like, God or the universe are telling them something, like a fact about themselves or something that's going to happen. At the end of the day, again, these are ego dystonic thoughts. These are statements that you're hearing or experiencing in your mind that don't align with who it is that you are, who it is that you believe yourself to be, and who it is that you're trying to become. So that's where that tension comes in, and that's where those compulsions come in to try to ensure that that's not what's going to happen, or ensure that you can be that person that you're trying to be. So the number one thing to start with is catching what those compulsions are. So if you find yourself scrolling through Facebook and you find yourself having, wanting to check and evaluate every single time you notice a child or notice a child video, whatever it might be, first thing to do would be to catch yourself and practice resisting that active compulsion. Now, it's not to say that you're not going to have that thought about it, but the active step of checking or evaluating is going to be important, or resisting doing that. Now, I know one of the things that ACT talks about is not to have a dead man's goal. Right? And a dead man's goal is something that a dead man can also do, and the dead man is going to do it better than you. So if it's to scroll, if you were saying, all right, your exposure is to scroll through Facebook and to not check. Well, guess what? If a dead person can scroll through Facebook, they're going to be better at not checking their groin, because a dead person's not going to do anything because they dead. I don't know if that was, maybe that was redundant. But the point is, they're not going to check either. But remember, you might impulse naturally, without your control, without your desire, have your attention go to your groin. We're going to practice a stance, we're going to practice a stance of acceptance. If your brain happens to go there, okay. If your brain happens to go to something else, okay. But we're going to observe it, we're going to notice it. We're going to accept the reality that thing happened without engaging with it, without following up on it or going further down the rabbit hole with it, without judging yourself or criticizing yourself, being kind and compassionate, welcoming of these thoughts, not because they're good or they're right or they reflect who you are or what you truly want, but because they're there. Y'all, we are going to get all sorts of bonkers thoughts. I have all sorts of bonkers thoughts all day, and that's what happens because unfortunately, we have these human brains where that's the sort of thing that happens. So instead, one of the things that you can do is scroll through Facebook, and you know what? We're gonna push those buttons a little bit. We're gonna poke the bear. We're gonna chase the bully around the yard instead of living in fear that maybe you're gonna scroll through Facebook and see a picture of a kid and you're gonna get this uncomfortable, terrible thought. Oh no, how terrible would that be? We're gonna say, bring it on. What could we say to that? Well, maybe it might be, you know what? Maybe I will. Maybe I will do that. To the violent thought that someone out there is who's having these, harmful thoughts, you go, maybe I will. You could also say, you know what? Maybe I'll do that a little bit later today. Or, later, but for right now, I'm going to do something else, right? You could even say, that sounds like a great idea. But you know what? I got other things to do. Right? I'm busy. I'm going to go kill that person later. I'm going to go molest that person later. So not right now, but maybe later. Now that is going to produce anxiety. That's going to be uncomfortable. And you're going to say, well, that's not me. That's not naturally who I am. I know that. You know that too. The point of it is to lean into this thing and to let yourself have that discomfort. We've talked in this podcast a lot about seeing exposures like lifting weights. I don't care what sort of weight you're lifting, so long as it's heavy. That is how we build muscle. That's how we get strong, right? We're doing things to become emotionally and mentally strong in the face of anxiety. So this kind of vulnerability, this thought, it feels really scary. So we're going to go and embrace that thought. And we're going to work towards tolerating that thought and increasing the amount of that we can have. And sooner or later, we're going to be strong with that thought and be able to have a huge amount of those thoughts, huge amount of anxiety related to those thoughts. And it's not going to be a big deal. We're going to treat it as if these are just thoughts that you can have, but it starts by leaning into it and getting closer to it. You're not going to get stronger by not lifting weights. Avoiding them will just leave you as you are or make you weaker than you are. So instead, we need to do the thing that's hard. So that's some stuff that you could do. So Alex, I hope that was helpful. I know we're just going simple and quick with these questions because we got things to do. So let's get on to Salt and Pepper's question. All right, so it's just a little bit longer, but we'll try to just zip through it. So they say, first, Kevin, or they say, hey, Kevin, first, I want to say thank you for your podcast. It's been an awesome resource, and it's helped me a lot during my time struggling with OCD. You are welcome, and thank you for listening. All right. I wanted to ask if OCD can make you feel as if you liked or welcomed an intrusive thought or an unsettling question. I've been really struggling a lot with groinal sensations, they say from POCD in sexual taboo obsessions. And as a result, I'm pretty sure my overall anxiety has been higher than usual. Today, I had the thought, would you be sad if you knew you passed away today? And instead of feeling the sadness that I expected to feel, I felt what I can only describe as a feeling of calmness and okayness. I felt as though I enjoyed or welcomed the possibility of not being alive, as I also felt a tingling feeling in my head that I would describe as calming, and they say parenthetically, like something that would help or something that would make you go to sleep, if that makes sense. So they go on to say, I immediately started to obsess and analyze why I felt this way instead of feeling sadness or regular anxiousness. Could OCD make me feel as though I actually don't want to be alive? I never seriously considered suicide, but I felt some depressive symptoms during my time struggling with OCD, such as low energy, fatigue, and some feelings of sadness and overall anxiousness. I've been having trouble wondering if this was some sort of suicidal OCD, intrusive thought, or genuine suicidal ideation. Overall, the whole episode has made me feel anxious that I could have actual suicidal thoughts, as opposed to just a random or unimportant feeling to that question. Thank you so much for everything that you do. All right, Salt and Pepper, thank you so much for sending this in. So as I said to Alex, so these sort of thoughts can be confusing. And the problem is as a therapist, I don't know. I don't know what's going on with you because I'm just going off of what you mentioned. So when questions like this come in, I really do encourage people to go and talk with a therapist and start unpacking what these thoughts mean, because, we do want to help, discern between whether or not and to what degree, is this quote, just suicidal OCD, or is there in part some genuine suicidal ideation that we want to be pulling apart? Now, that's the hardest part of doing this podcast is all I have is what y'all send me. So I'm just kind of guessing to a certain degree. That's not a pleasant feeling. And it's also, I can't really guide you exactly what to do because I don't really have all of those details. So my first and foremost, and by the way, there's a book called The Imp of the Mind, which is an awesome and very short book on OCD. I encourage everybody to read it. There are always 2 chapters that freak people out. And almost even 2 pages in it that freak people out. One of them is related to intrusive thoughts about suicide, and the other is intrusive thoughts about pedophilia. Naturally, so that's exactly where we're going today. Those 2 chapters, or those 2 pages, tick people off because they're the only ones in the entire book where the author goes, maybe you should go see a therapist about this stuff, as opposed to, we're going to treat this like an obsession. We're going to treat this like just one of the weird thoughts that float through your mind, whatever. And I think it's because of the liability that probably the publisher wanted to put out there because, nobody wants to be sued for anything. And I suppose I'm doing the same thing. But the point is that I don't know. And for every listener out there, I would encourage you to go chat with a therapist to help unpack some of this stuff. Now, I'm going to do my best in this, but if there are thoughts and concerns, go chat with a therapist, a real live in-person therapist that you can talk about this with. Okay, so what I will say is, yeah, OCD can definitely make you obsess about whether or not you want to be alive. It can certainly make you wonder about whether or not you actually have suicidal ideation, actually want to kill yourself, or actually will, or actually should. It can make you wonder about all of those things. Can it make you do it? Of course not. You are always in control of your actions. And I know that these thoughts can be really scary and really uncomfortable. But remember, OCD can also make you question whether or not you want something or feel that it's true about you, because it twists what you think, right? You can have the thought about anything. And then the obsessional question can be, well, you had that thought. What does that say about you? Is that something that you actually want? And dude, we hear about that with the sexual orientation OCD. I had a same-sex thought. Well, maybe that's something that you actually want. And accompanying that might be a feeling in your groin, or it might be a feeling of calmness, or a feeling of excitement, or a feeling of anxiety that is interpreted as, attraction or joy or eagerness or something like that. It can be a violent thought. It can be a thought about getting sick. It can be a spiteful thought. It can be fill in the blank. But the obsessional thought comes up and says, well, you had this thought. Well, I wonder what this means about me. Now, there's a ton of work that can be done to kind of go to the bottom of what does that mean about you? Or what does that say about you? Or what do you fear it says about you? That's more accurate to say. Kind of going down and down and down and trying to figure out what's the core fear. And we've talked about the core fear on this a lot, which is an important thing to consider, right? But one of the things that I'm hearing in this is well, what does this mean about me? And am I developing a new obsession? Because you already talked about having kind of POCD and other sexually taboo obsessions. Well, this one wasn't one of those. So what the heck is it? I wonder if anxiety is grabbing onto this and noticing a unexpected event or an unexpected feeling. Kind of similar to Alex, right? Alex was talking about going through Facebook and he got this thought and that was unexpected or undesired, or we'll leave it with that. Unexpected and undesired, so he did something about it. Well, all of a sudden now those were linked. I wonder if all of a sudden you had this thought that you didn't ask for, you didn't seek out, you didn't want, and then all of a sudden you had it. But you had a reaction, a response to it, an emotional experience that you didn't expect. And that then can raise questions for people. Well, what does this say about me? Why did I have that? Was it good? Was it bad? You get the idea. And then there's nothing in that that's going to give you a satisfactory answer. Because the universe is not coming down and saying, well, it's because you would be okay with it, or it's because your brain's being a jerk to you, or it's because you're tired and you were actually subconsciously thinking about something else. I don't know. Point is, we have a bunch of weird thoughts. Now, this is where I think ICBT actually does a really good job, and this is one of the exercises that I would do with a client because I really like this part of it. One of these parts. It's module 2, and it talks about the logic behind OCD. And what it kind of talks about is OCD has this wonderful way of taking little bits of information, not direct information, mind you, but little bits from all over the place in your mind and your experience, and combining it in this way and rounding up to something. And again, not a direct thing. It is circumstantial evidence, right? So think about a courtroom scene. It doesn't say, well, we know that, you killed this person because we had it on video and we have the evidence, we have a written note from you saying you were going to kill this person and we have it on video and all of that. It says, well, this person died. We don't have anybody on camera doing it, and we don't have anything about your whereabouts during the exact time of the murder, so you probably murdered him, right? There's no direct linkage to it, but it has all this circumstantial evidence, so it combines that in this way. So the module 2 goes through 5 different points, kind of 5 different ways that OCD develops its logic, right? And I'm sure I'm sure some ICBT people are just shaking their hands at me for not going through this absolutely perfectly. But you know what? Come fight me. I'll be at the OCD conference. Come get me. Or we'll have a conversation about it. That can also happen too. All right. So it goes through 5 points: abstract facts and ideas, general rules, hearsay, personal experiences, and it's possible. So let me give you an example about how it might show up as having like a kind of a rounding up for the belief that you might actually have suicidal ideation. So let's go with abstract facts and ideas. Well, suicide as a concept exists. That is true. So that's one bit of evidence that's going to throw at you. This thing does exist, which is true. But it's going to combine that with general rules, so general things that we kind of know about that. So an example of this might be, well, people who are suicidal or are okay with, or people who are suicidal are okay thinking about not existing, and they don't feel anxious about whether or not, they don't feel anxious about thinking about dying, right? So that might be considered a general rule. And of course, there are caveats, and that's not the case for everybody. But maybe that's one of the ways that your anxiety is combining the fact that suicidal exists, and this is one of those things that people know about suicide, right? Okay, maybe there's hearsay. Hearsay is just stuff that you've heard along the way of living, right? So it might be, well, I heard this story about someone who's having these kind of thoughts before attempting suicide. Oh, no, well, now we've got, I heard that one story that one time, or I watched that one news story that one time, and it's going to combine this. But it's going to add that to now maybe personal experiences. Now, with this, personal experiences, and with all these, you may not have something that fits really neatly into all these. So I'm kind of making this up for you in this. But you can kind of see how all these combined. So with personal experiences, this is where your anxiety will grab onto something that's actually happened to you and combine that with other things to round up. So personal experiences might be, well, you know what? A couple of years ago, I actually was having suicidal thoughts. But, and I was having those thoughts right before I was hospitalized or right before I got into therapy for the first time. But then when I was having those thoughts, well, that's when I was suicidal and I was having those thoughts. Well, now we're going to combine that with this abstract fact and these general rules and this hearsay. The last category is the catch-all of all of them. It's just, you know what? It's possible. It's possible. And that one, dude, that one can trump all the other ones. You could say, I have no experience. I've never heard of any, I don't know anybody who's, had suicidal thoughts. But you know what? Or you might say, I have no interest. I have no desire. I've never had genuine suicidal thoughts about myself. In fact, I want to live. I've got this excitement. I'm going to see this concert later this week. I'm going to the OCD conference next week. It's going to be great. But your brain goes, doesn't matter. It's possible. Now what? Now what do you do? And again, we can fill this in with almost any obsession, right? It's possible that an asteroid is going to kill me. It's possible that God is going to just squish me with his giant foot. It's possible that I'm going to get into a car accident today. You know what? It's possible my plane is going to crash on the flight or on the way to the conference. All of this is possible, and I can't disagree with it, and anxiety knows it. So it's going to combine and add and twist and pull all together into this neat little package. Now, that's for having actual suicidal ideation. Now, we could go through this whole process again for simply having suicidal ideation OCD, right? So the fact is that exists. General rules about that is people who have suicidal OCD also have these thoughts and have these obsessions. Hearsay, we might have heard that one story from that one podcast, that one time about the person who had suicidal ideation. Personal experiences. Well, I have OCD. I have scary and uncomfortable thoughts sometimes, and maybe it's possible too. So you can see how all of that combines into this story. So why am I spending so much time on this? To acknowledge this may be the story that your brain is telling you, but one thing that you never said was, yes, I am having suicidal thoughts, or, you know what, I am in fact obsessing about my suicidal ideation, or I'm having obsessions and compulsive behavior about suicide. The obsession is about whether or not you do have suicidal ideation. There's not this direct link that you're drawing. You're combining these things, and your anxiety is rounding up to, boy, you know, maybe it's this whole other thing. So I bring that up why it's important, because there is no direct link. Your brain is taking all of this out of context information and just giving it to you as something to worry about. So maybe because there isn't a direct link between A and B, perhaps compulsions, rumination, checking, reassurance seeking, and avoidance is unnecessary and uncalled for and useless. Okay, the last thing I'm going to say to this is you and I are not responsible for the feelings that we have. And sometimes, man, we're going to have unexpected feelings at times. We cannot expect ourselves to have the quote, right feeling at the right time for the right reasons, or the right thoughts for that matter. We get stuff. Our brain presents things. Our emotions do things that we sometimes don't like. And instead of jumping down the rabbit hole with it, we can take a stance of acceptance and a generosity of interpretation. So let's start with acceptance. We can say, you know what, sometimes I'm going to have feelings that I don't like or love, but we're going to acknowledge that at that moment, I had that feeling. That's going to be okay. Maybe not okay conceptually or what you would ideally like to have, but we are saying it is okay because it is there. And the option to say it's not okay makes us go through this wild rabbit hole of chasing it down and trying to figure out what the heck it means, and we may not find it, and that process may be simply useless to us. So instead we're saying, you know what, I had that feeling. I felt angry, sad, happy, mad, confused, horny, whatever it is. Yep, I did. And I'm going to see what else is next. And then the generosity of interpretation. Being kind with yourself, being thoughtful about how you respond to yourself, and again, being generous in what you're doing with and to and for yourself as a result of having that thought and that feeling. So next time it happens, next time you have a thought like this, acknowledge it. Go, oh, I'm noticing I'm having that thought. You can even say, oh, I'm noticing I'm having a thought about this thought and this feeling. Interesting. Well, thanks, brain. Thanks, body, for giving me that thought. I'm going to see what else is next. I'm going to see what else is on the horizon. And we're going to leave it at that. And so with that, I'm going to leave it at that. So everybody, thank you all so much for listening. Salt and Pepper and Alex, thank you so much for your questions. I hope this was helpful. I hope it gave you something to think about in the process. If you have follow-ups to that, if you would like to just be angry and criticize me about my ICBT prowess, that's also acceptable. But until next time, everybody, take a risk, challenge yourself, and don't take your brain too seriously. Bye. Thank you for listening to the Fearcast. If you would like your question answered on a future episode, please click on the Submit a Question link at fearcastpodcast.com. If you would like your question answered sooner, please send me a recording of your question to questions@fearcastpodcast.com, or by sending me an audio message through Instagram by DMing me at fearcastpodcast on Instagram. If you like the Fearcast, please write a review on your podcast platform of choice. Please remember that the Fearcast is not a substitute for psychotherapy. If you need a little bit of help in your recovery, please go over to fearcastpodcast.com and click on the Find Help link, and there's going to be some information for you there. So until next time, take a risk, challenge yourself, and don't take your brain too seriously. Bye.